Hey, what's up? This is Kevin from Kevin's BBQ Joints, and this one is extremely special. It's with Homer Robertson, who is a world champion Chuckwagon competitor, multi-year winner. But he is so much more than that, and I had heard such great things from so many different people, and I had seen pictures of him at different camps that they put on at Texas A&M barbecue camps, and I saw these breakfasts that he put on, and I was just so intrigued to get his story and learn a lot about what he does and about the Chuckwagon culture and about Chuckwagon history, because I know nothing about that. I know a lot of you guys don't either. We started out talking about fire because he is the executive assistant chief at the Fort Worth Fire Department. He's been brought in by Dr. Sable and Dr. Griffin to be on panels to talk about fire and fire management and different things. But now he is working on a new program about fireproofing your business, so fireproofing barbecue joints. And we get into that and different fires that have happened at barbecue joints that you know of, and that's super interesting. And then it kind of diverges a little bit into working at a fire department. We kind of touch a little bit on 9/11 because it's really intriguing, his stories about that. And then we jump into Chuckwagon cooking, and that is fascinating. I know you guys are going to love that. And Dutch ovens. And we get deep into the history of Texas cattle. And it's definitely well worth your time. And then his connection to Texas A&M, his son Ty, who works now at the Meat Board, which is in Fort Worth, and you definitely should check out. I'll put links to everything below. But we talk about how his relationship with Texas A&M grew. And if you ever get lucky enough, if you've joined Foodways Texas and you're on the list to go to either barbecue summer camp or Camp Brisket, there's a chance that you'll get, because the dates are different now because of COVID, everything's been pushed to different times. If it's not in the hot summer months, there's a good chance that you will get a breakfast by Homer Robertson, as well as sides and different desserts from him, all cooked from the Chuckwagon, which is insanely special. And also he is available for weddings, for functions, to do Chuckwagon cooking, which is something that most people have never seen. It's authentic as all get out, and we get to why he started Chuckwagon cooking. Anyways, I'm all over the place, but this is such a great interview, such a great chat. I could have talked to Homer for 15 more hours. I can't thank him enough for taking the time. I know you are going to thoroughly enjoy this, and I know that if you are around Homer, say hi to him and learn about Chuckwagon cooking. And if you're enjoying these, please subscribe. That way you don't miss out. I'm trying to do as many of these as possible. That way you don't miss out. I have a website at kevinsbbqjoints.com. But at the end, stay safe and be sure to visit your local barbecue joint. I want to
Right.
introduce people that don't know about you for some reason to learn about your background, as well as what you do for Texas A&M, as well
Oh, sure.
as yeah, the fire department and all that good stuff.
Right. I'm going back down there next week to do a class
Oh, are you? Okay.
at their barbecue town hall.
Okay. Oh, there's a barbecue town.
They
Is
have
that with
so that
Foodways?
no, that is something that Texas A&M does. Dr. Sable and Dr. Griffin. It's kind of an extension program.
Okay.
So they invite I think pretty much anybody. I don't know if it's by invitation only, but so they're focusing on the barbecue community, especially the restaurants
Okay.
and people that supply them. So they've done these for a number of years. They call it the BBQ Town Hall, and so they'll just invite people, and they have an opportunity to visit, but they'll bring some really good speakers in. Like they'll bring a guy in that'll talk about beef prices, what
Okay.
he suspects beef prices are going to do. I'm doing one. Dr. Sable uses me a lot on the smoke panel because of my background in the fire department. Just talking about, kind of the fire behavior, the fire dynamics part of that. And so I am doing a program called that I'm developing right now. We've never done it before. It's called Fireproofing Your Business.
Oh,
And you look around the state of Texas, a lot of our barbecue places have had significant fires in them.
oh yeah.
You look at Franklin's or Himes just had one in Dallas, in
Hmm.
their Dallas location here a few weeks ago. And, just what to watch for, but also how we take that to the backyard. We're going to talk about, probably use this program again in the summer camps, both the
Smart.
brisket camp and the summer barbecue camp. And just for the backyard cooker, things like some of these guys have built these great smokers, but they're on a trailer and they have a wooden deck on them.
Yes, that's.
you, you know you're going to lose some embers out of
Hmm.
that. You're going to lose some coals. So having a deck that's fireproof, making sure that when you dispose of them, you clean your pit out as part of the maintenance part of that, is making sure you're putting that in a non-combustible container and
Smart.
disposing of them properly. And in Franklin's case, he and I visited, Aaron and I visited a couple of weeks ago at Brisket Camp,
I saw that.
and I specifically asking him about the fire he had, and that was a phenomenon from the standpoint of he had his night crew guy on, they were working, and the guy was tending the fires. And Aaron does a really good job of managing his fires.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a hurricane came onto the coast of Texas, and that gust front came through, blew an ember out of one of the pits, and that thing got wedged over in the side of the building. And I mean, that's just, when you got 40, 50, 60 mile an hour winds blowing, how do you control and manage that? I mean, there was just hardly anything he could have done about that. That was in a very significant fire that had him closed for a number of, months.
Well, now with something like that, how would you avoid? Would you do a specific type of insulation, or is there something that you can do to protect your building, or what would you do?
And I think in Aaron's case is that you got to realize that, hey, I've got a significant weather front coming through tonight. You kind of have to pre-plan that, so to speak, and then just maybe you have more people on duty. I think there was just one guy there, and just watch where that stuff's going. But also, when you design and build those facilities, you've got to do that and make sure that you don't have many combustibles around.
Yeah, no.
We're just something where if something gets away from you, you don't have a wood pile close by, or if you do, it's upwind. There's a lot of things you could do about that, but you just got to pay attention. I think probably another person there helping could have, made a difference in that case. But
Hutchins had one recently too.
Hutchins had a fire. I think it was electrical. I think that was a sign or something. I don't remember, but that's another one I need to look at. They had another fire, but restaurant fires are reasonably pretty common. And one of the things I'm going to talk about in this program is that where you put your emphasis. And when you're in the restaurant business as a whole, but barbecue people specifically, is that you got to put your focus on where that is. As a firefighter for the last 40 something years, I'm going to tell you, I never went to a fire in a restaurant that was in the front of the house. Those fires never start at the hostess table. They always start in the back. Okay. I always went to the back of the building. So it's in the kitchen, it's in the storeroom, but also you got to think that's where our employees smoke. That's where they charge their phone.
Yeah.
That's where the pits are. I mean, all of those things. So that's where you need to put your focus on, is in the back of the house, taking care of business, keeping it clean, maintaining it, using a quality electrician, because some of these is going to be electrical in nature. Don't be just letting some jackleg electrician or you, unless you're really good at it, trying to do electrical work back there. Have somebody that's licensed and bonded, because you certainly may need that license and bonded for your insurance.
There's a lot of shoddy work. Sure. I'm sure you see a lot of it, and just because I want to keep that part in, this is very interesting. I think a lot of people will take a lot out of that, and they'll want to be part of this class. And I'm sure, like, when I'm 3 years in and still trying to make the summer camp and Camp Brisket, but I can't wait, because I think this is very important. This is integral, what you're doing. Now, can you give a little background here, because you're the deputy fire chief for the Fort Worth Fire Department, or are there multiple fire departments in Fort Worth?
I'm the executive assistant chief, so I'm the number 2 guy in the Fort Worth Fire Department. And it's Fort Worth. A lot of people always think about Dallas, Fort Worth, and we're the 12th largest city in the United States now. And if you look at the top 10, we had 2 of the top 10 barbecue places in Fort Worth, Goldie's and Panther City. So an emerging food scene there, and even though I am in the fire department, people probably recognize me more for my relationship with the food world. You know, my real passion is I'm a chuckwagon cook.
Yeah, and
And
I want to get heavily
you
into
know,
that. I've taken a
I
lot of
cater.
notes, so hopefully I could ask you the right questions.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, my background in the fire business, I've been, you know, in the fire business since 1978. I've been involved with Fort Worth since 1985. So I worked my way through the ranks. And so I'm now the number two guy in the Fort Worth Fire Department and getting close to retirement. I'm at the end of my runway as far as working in the fire department.
I don't know if this is a little tangent. Do you know that Sam Jones is? I think he's a volunteer fire chief in Aden, North Carolina.
I don't know, Sam. No, I don't.
When I talked to him the last time, he has a giant barn that he he does work out of. And we talked to, and he was talking about how because it was so local that he was called upon, and when he was training people, he'd say, you know, you might be coming to a family member's home or a neighbor that you
Sure.
know or someone you grew up with, so or come on a scene of a car accident. So how is that mentally? How have you dealt with that?
You know, I have had those incidents. So my family dates back. I live in Granbury, Texas, which is about 40 miles southwest of Fort Worth,
Yeah.
right here on the Brazos River. And so my family hasn't been involved with the Granbury Fire Department since 1907.
Wow.
And so I was my dad was the fire chief here. I was the fire chief in Granbury. That's how I got interested in the fire service, was through my
Okay.
volunteer service in my own hometown, and then went on to Fort Worth to work as in a career fire department, but still really involved. But that is an interesting part of being a firefighter in your local town, is that you do. I've made a number of incidents, car wrecks and heart attacks and fires in people's homes of who were close family friends,
Yeah.
and um, you don't realize how that what that connection is until you see people that you know that have
Hmm.
been killed or injured or their properties damaged. That really has a pretty big mental aspect of that. But you also know that you're doing something for your community when you do that, and you're trying to help. I mean, it is really it is the uh, it's being a soldier in on the front line of
Oh
your own
yeah.
hometown. It's defending your own home. So
Yeah, and it's valiant, and I appreciate so much what you do. And I recently, because of the anniversary of 9/11, they had a lot of documentaries, and they had a documentary that was these filmmakers from France who had come and they'd worked with the fire department. I don't know if you
yeah,
saw that, but that
so
was
those
so powerful.
film efforts for France. Uh, I just there's been a book published, and you should read it. It's called Uncommon Heroes.
Okay.
It was written by a guy named Joseph Pfeiffer. Joseph Pfeiffer actually is a friend of mine. He and I have taught together.
Oh.
Joseph Pfeiffer was the battalion chief that the French guys were riding with.
Oh, fascinating.
So, and they interviewed him in 60 Minutes.
Mhm.
But look for Joseph Pfeiffer's book. It's a fascinating book on the inside of being in the lobby of the World Trade Center. Joseph Pfeiffer's brother was killed there. He basically sent him to his death.
I
He
remember.
was in
Okay.
command. He was the first battalion chief in the World Trade Center, and he sent his brother basically to his death unknowingly, of
Yeah.
course. And but Joseph Pfeiffer is a fascinating guy. Teaches, consults and teaches around the world now. Teaches at the crisis management at Harvard. But just an awesome guy, close
Oh.
personal friend of mine.
Oh, that is. I'll after I get off this interview, I'll order that book because
Yes.
that was such a. I think I had seen clips from that maybe, but I never had seen it in its entirety. And I watched a little bit on 60 Minutes and then the whole thing, and that was
Yeah.
what
So
they
he
dealt
was
with.
interviewed on the 60 Minutes. The French guys were sitting in the back seat of his Suburban, and he has his hat on and talking on the phone, and he as they're rolling toward the World Trade. He's standing in the street with them when the planes fly over. You remember that
Yeah,
scene in
yeah.
the clip?
Uh-huh.
But he's standing in the street. Chief Pfeiffer is with the French guy.
I remember on that corner. Yeah. Okay. Right. Corner-ish.
Yeah.
And
They were on a gas leak in Manhattan.
that's what it was. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. how was that? This is so but tangential, but what was that day like for you? And were you at the station that day?
I was the captain of the fire department shops at the time. So I was managing the fleet for the Fort Worth Fire Department. And a guy comes in my office and said, "Hey, Homer, turn television on." So I turned my television in my office on, and he said, "Man, I got a hell of a fire going in at the World Trade Center." And I said, "A plane hit it." And then so we're watching that, and then the second plane hits, and said, "That's not an accident."
No.
So I called the fire chief up and I said, "Look, I don't know if you're keeping up with this, but that's an act of terrorism. And we need to be putting things in place to protect ourselves." So we started locking stations down, closing off facilities, making sure things like that we didn't have any trucks sitting out where somebody could have stole them, and then just preparing in case that the country was going to be under an attack. But it certainly went through our system. Yeah, that was quite a day.
Quite a day for everyone, but I've never spoken with anyone specifically that was working in a fire department. Oh, that's yeah, it's such a rough day. But let's change course, because people who are listening to this, probably they're interested, but they're also interested in your background with the chuck wagon. Is that chuck wagons were mostly used in were beginning to use in the 1800s? Is that when they first 1860s or something? Or
So let me give you a little historical background
I would love
on
that.
Chuckwagon. So it really goes back to Civil War days, and so Civil
Makes
War is
sense.
over with. Texans start returning home, and this state was basically economically destitute. It was we started the period of Reconstruction, but there was no money in this state.
Wow.
The war had drained it all. A lot of people weren't coming back. Confederate soldiers returning back to the state. Well, what we did have was millions of heads of longhorns that had, for the entirety of the Civil War, had been roaming free and
Wow.
multiplying, of course, but they're wild as deer, and so they were worth nothing here, but because of the north, the industrial area of the United States, they needed protein, and that was the protein they needed beef.
Mm-hmm.
So the closest railheads were in Missouri. And so they had all these cattle here. Well, how do we get cattle from South Texas? They started in South Texas, came right through the Fort Worth area, up into Oklahoma, and then over into Missouri, Kansas, depending on what the closest railheads were. Railroads were moving west. Well, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression that an army moves on its stomach, and basically saying that you've got to feed soldiers for them to be able to fight. Mm-hmm. Same thing's true with a trail crew, is that you got to be able for them to ride all day, drive cattle all day, and those were 90 days to 6 month trail drives, depending on what part of the state they started and came in. So they were living outside. So how do you do that? How do you feed a crew of 15 people, 15 men at the time, and haul supplies, protect them somewhat from the elements, but feed them, and because if you couldn't feed them, they couldn't give you a day's work, right?
No, that's true.
So a guy named Charles Goodnight, who you also see his name a lot because he was a trailblazer, and he found the Goodnight Loving Trail was one of the five major cattle trails in Texas. But Charles Goodnight, Larry McMurtry, when he wrote Lonesome Dove, he took Charles Goodnight's story and did the adaptation for Lonesome Dove. The story is really about Charles Goodnight and Oliver Loving.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Oliver Loving actually got killed out in New Mexico in an Indian attack, got gangrene in Fort Sumter, and Charles Goodnight was his really good friend, and he said, "Hey, do not let them bury me in this godforsaken country in New Mexico."
Wow.
So Goodnight loaded him up and brought him back to Weatherford, Texas, and buried him in Weatherford, Texas, which is about 20 minutes. But Goodnight was the originator of the Chuckwagon. Okay. He realized if he needed to move a crew and feed them and take care of them, so he went to Weatherford, Texas. He had a a carpenter build him a chuck box on the back of it where he could carry supplies and Dutch ovens and food and all the things that he needed, and use that chuck wagon in order to move those trail crews.
So did people see what they did and then mimicked it? Is that kind of what
started mimicking it? Yes. And it was just one of those innovations that came along. And they go, oh, there's a better way of doing something. And then you started seeing the big wagon and buggy builders. Most of the time, they just took a wagon and did the addition to it, put the chuck box onto a regular wagon. Goodnight used a surplus Army supply wagon to do that.
Oh.
But some of the other major wagon and buggy builders also went in there and did some chuck boxes. But most of the time, they were original. It's just like people's kitchens. How do you want your kitchen set up?
Uh-huh.
And so moving forward today, people have been using wagons. It's still chuck wagons still a very economical way of ranching or taking care of cowboys in the big part of this country, the West Texas, the Arizonas, the New Mexicos, the Wyomings, because they may be out 2 hours from where they're living. And so if you need to start early in the morning, who wants to get up at 2 a.m. and drive 2 hours to, where you're going to work and unload everything? So they go and camp and stay at the wagon. And that's still something that happens today. And people say, why, I never see a chuck wagon. You can't see them from the highway.
That's it. Right? That was kind of a question, but so people are still making chuck wagons. So are there still companies? Are there companies that were making chuck wagons back in the day that are still making them? Or do they exist anymore?
No, most of those. There are people who are making chuck wagons today. But most of the time they're taking those wagons and again adapting them to their needs.
Okay.
They're putting a chuck box on there. They're putting all the things that they need on there. There's some really good chuck wagon builders around the country. Not a lot, but I'm going to say there's a handful of really good ones. Hanson Wagon Work up in South Dakota.
Okay.
A guy named Glenn Moreland down in Fort Davis, Texas, called Texas Cowboy Outfitters, are building chuck boxes. But almost any backyard woodworker could build a chuck box if he had the plans.
The chuck box is the whole thing. It's not just a portion.
No, it's just the back. Usually they'll just take a regular wagon, and the chuck box is the back of that. And it has a fold-down table on it. It has shelves. It's almost like a kitchen cabinet.
Okay. I feel like such a Yankee asking questions because I'm from Los Angeles. So it's like, it's something that I long to understand, but I didn't grow up with it.
Right. So in today's world, we're still seeing them used on ranches, but pretty cool. And you can get on the internet and certainly find these. Is that we have a lot of competitive chuck wagon cook-offs.
I saw that.
Most of those are somewhere in the Southwest, and that's something I really enjoy doing. It's kind of how I got interested in.
Yeah, how did you get interested?
Getting more involved with my grandmother passed away in the early '80s, and she had a cast iron Dutch oven, a true Dutch oven, what we call a range oven now. It has 3 little feet on the bottom.
Okay.
Has a lid with a lip on it to hold the coals on. I found a Dutch oven in our house. And they go, yeah, you can have that. Take that. So I took that and just started playing with it. And I'd go to parties and somebody'd be barbecuing or grilling steaks. And I'd take the coals and I'd make a pineapple upside down cake, or I'd make a peach cobbler with it. And they were huge hits. Man, there's nothing better than a dessert cooked in a Dutch oven. Nothing. It's awesome. As good as any dessert in any restaurant you'll go to. So as I got more and more into Dutch ovens, I wanted an opportunity to, play with them, use them, demonstrate, compete. My wife at the time had a tie-in. I'd been raised on a ranch as well, and my wife at the time had some tie-in to the 4 Sixes ranch in Guthrie, Texas. That's if you're watching Yellowstone. There's lots of tie-ins to the Sixes there. Sixes has a great chuck wagon, and they have a long history of using chuck wagon. I haven't seen it on the show yet, but so one of the ways to compete more, use my Dutch ovens, was to get a chuck wagon. So I did that, and I tell people this story. It was that one day I have just one Dutch oven, and 20 years later, I'm driving home from work, and a guy calls me and he said, "Hey, is this Homer Robertson?" Yes. Chuckwagon cook? Yes, it is. Depends on who you talk to, but yes. Some people will call me a Chuckwagon cook, and some people won't. And he said, I work for Food Network, and he said if you call 20 people in the United States and talk about Chuckwagon cooking, your name comes up 19 times. I go, well, no, I really didn't know that. And then just a week or two later, as the story goes, I'm judging a throwdown with Bobby Flay.
I was wondering how that happened.
How you get to a point where life's going to take you
Mm-hmm.
in certain things. But now I still love to go to competitive Chuckwagon cook-offs, and I've been the world champion 3 times. But just the opportunity to get out. Chuckwagons are like Kevin. Have you ever had a party at your house? Where do people congregate? They
Mm-hmm.
congregate in the kitchen.
Oh yeah.
And it's the same thing with Chuckwagon. There's nothing better than sitting at the wagon, eating, having a beer, sitting around the fire. But it's just like having a good party at your house is being at the wagon.
But when you first started, when you got the chuck wagon, and forgive me, like, do you have to have horses to have a chuck wagon?
No, you do not. Most of these competitions do not require you to have horses. They don't require you to pull it. But what's happened over the last 30 years of me cooking is that these chuck wagons, 30 years ago, the wagons weren't very good. They were just kind of thrown together. The whole chuck wagon cook-off process has evolved to the point now. These chuck wagons are museum pieces. They're
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, well maintained, authentically correct. Because in these Chuckwagon cook-offs, they look at two things. Out of 100 points, about 60 of it's food, 60 or 70% of it's the food. So we always look at meat, bean, bread, dessert, and potatoes. 5 categories. It's always beef. You always cook some form of beef. You know why, Kevin? Because we didn't take chickens up the trail, right?
Of course.
It was always beef.
Makes sense. Yes.
We didn't herd chicken. So it's always beef. And so they want you to cook 5 categories. So it's not like a true barbecue cook-off where you're just cooking protein. You got to be a baker. You got to be a pastry chef. You got to be able to cook some kind of beef. A lot of times it's chicken fries or steaks, or it could be a roast, green chili beef tips, any number of dishes. So that's about 60 or 70%. And then the rest of it, they judge the wagon. So they want the wagon to look like it did in 1880. That was 1880, 1890 were the prime trail driving years, 70s, 80s, and 90s. That kind of another interesting point. If we don't get, I geek out on the history part of this.
I know, I love this part. Please.
Especially as we, especially Europeans. So when I'm doing an event, say in the Fort Worth Stockyards, and we have a ton of Europeans come through Fort Worth and go to the stockyards, is that they're into the cowboy stuff in Europe, especially the trail driving stuff, because what have they been watching? Old Western movies.
Yeah.
And they understand that, is that you look at the impact of what the Chuckwagon did, is that they recognized that 20 or 30 year time period had a huge impact on shaping the image of America around the world, even today.
It's fascinating.
They love that. They love that cowboy stuff. And where you see those old Western movies, and that trail cook is often depicted as a grumpy, irritable, hard to get along with guy. I'm going to tell you, you cook on a wagon for 4 or 5 days in a row, and I fall into that mode, because he's the last guy to go to bed. He's the first guy to get up, always cleaning, always loading, moving somewhere else. It was a very difficult job, and that's one of the reasons he was the second highest paid guy on the trail drive.
Oh wow.
The cook was, and it's because he had so many duties to do other than cooking. And he was the dentist, the doctor, managed all kinds of stuff, and so a lot of responsibility. But was the second highest paid guy, but also very hard. But you had to have a good cook in order to keep good cowboys.
Wow, and it makes sense, and it makes sense too that he would have like the first aid kit. He would have everything. He'd have to have that kind of knowledge, and it's tiring. I'm sure after, like, if you said these ran for almost 6 months at times.
Yeah, they could go up to 6 months easily. Yeah.
how
So
how was
outdoors
he
a
after
lot,
that?
all kinds of weather. So going back to
Yeah.
the competition, so we used the 5 categories, and then they judged the wagon. So I wanted to look like it did in 1880. No plywood, no plastic, no stainless steel. They want that wagon to look like it did, and we can only use wood. So no propane, no gas of any kind. So all that stuff's done Dutch ovens, big pots on the fire using live coals.
And so, are you still using your grandmother's Dutch oven?
I still have my grandmother's Dutch oven. I don't use it anymore. There are some of those things that over time I've put back and just try to preserve, because the way that I use those Dutch ovens, we're rough on them. They get banged around a lot because we're moving them all the time. They get used hard. So there's a lot of maintenance involved with that, but that's just one of those family heirlooms I don't want to
Yeah.
lose.
Can you explain to people that might not know, because I think the word Dutch oven is thrown around a lot. What specifically is a Dutch oven?
So you see the Dutch oven word thrown around a lot. These TV chefs use it a lot.
Yeah.
They're using that specifically as a cast iron, either cast iron or cast iron that's been covered by an enamel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're using on their stovetops.
Yeah.
When I say Dutch oven, I really mean range oven, because there's a significant difference. And I can send you a picture of a range oven, and you can look it up. There's still Lodge cast iron still makes them.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of companies, both in the U.S. and abroad, cast in Dutch ovens. So normally those would have three feet on them,
Okay.
three little cast iron legs, and the reason for that is to hold that up off the coals, because when you're cooking with a Dutch oven, a true range oven, camp oven, is that you're using both top and bottom heat. And I do that. So we put coals on the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and we put coals on top,
That's what I
so
thought.
that it bakes from both directions. And the way that you regulate the heat, people said, well, how do you get good with that? Well, you burn a lot of stuff. You
Just
burn a
like
lot of
everything else.
your food. And then you go, oh, you know what? That was way too much heat. I cooked that too fast. So what I do is I build coals, and there's a lot of these Dutch oven societies, people that are interested in cast iron cooking. There's these Dutch oven societies that you don't have to have a Chuckwagon, but you can use your cast iron Dutch ovens, and they use charcoal
Okay.
briquettes, and they can tell you how many coals to put on top and how many to put on the bottom. There's a lot of really good techniques out there to do that. I use coals from wood that I've burned down, and I use a lot of hardwood. In Texas, we either use that hardwood is normally either oak or mesquite,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'll burn that wood down to get a good bed of coals. Take a shovel, and then I'll shovel the outside, build a ring around those Dutch ovens, because you got to remember the bottom will tend to burn quicker than anything else.
Yeah.
Because it's closer to the heat,
sure.
and there's no airspace in there. The top is a little bit more forgiving, because you'll have 2, 3, 4 inches of airspace between the lid and the food product. But the bottom tends to burn a little, so you may just kind of build those coals around there. But how you regulate the heat is by taking the coals off or on, adding more coals if you need it, or picking the Dutch oven off and just moving it off the coals. and slowing the cooking process down.
That makes sense. You can control it.
Well, you've got some control over it.
Literally.
Tons of, man, there are just so many good YouTube and internet videos of Dutch oven cooking.
Oh, I'm sure now. Yeah.
Still a lot of people are using Dutch ovens, and you can't go into a good outdoor store, Academy, Cabela's, Bass Pro Shop. Every one of them will have a Dutch oven, will have a number of Dutch ovens to pick from, just because people are still using them.
So then how did your connection with Texas A&M? Did Dr. Sable contact you, or how did that, or is it, I know that your son, is that what?
My son attended Texas A&M. He's as we were, lovingly refer to him as meat nerds. He went down there in 2014, and again, because my connection with them was through Ty.
Hi.
So they would invite me down to. We started out helping with the on Friday afternoons. They have their barbecue class for their students. Are you familiar with that?
I think I remember him talking about
they have that. Incoming freshmen will come in, and that class is at 4:15 on Fridays, and it's a weird time to have it. But what they're trying to do is build a connection with those kids to stay there and go to the ball games. So every Friday afternoon in the fall, there's these kids stay and they learn. They'll cook briskets one time. They'll cook pork butts one day. Right before Christmas they fry turkeys. So they're doing all these different. So I started going down there helping with the Friday afternoon barbecue class because Ty was involved with that. And I'll tell you that class probably, even though Ty was an ag major, it took him into the world of food and meat. Ty currently works for two old Aggies that own a company in Fort Worth called the Meat Board.
Oh, he works at the Meat Board. Okay.
Yeah, have you seen the Meat Board?
I talked to Joe.
Have you ever seen their little videos on Joe Risky?
Yeah. I talked to him a while back.
Yeah. So Joe, he works there with Joe. But if you ever look at follow them on Instagram or on Facebook, Ty does a lot of their videos.
Oh, that's Ty. Okay.
So
okay. Now it makes
he's
sense.
in the retail part and now in sales. But if any of your listeners are looking for really quality pieces of product, you can get prime brisket there. You can get Wagyu, beef ribs, all the things that great barbecuers need. You can pick up there at the Meat Board. Great steaks, and hand cut, dry aged, and just regular case. You need to go. So I'd started going there on helping with the Friday afternoon class, teaching a little bit, doing a little historical perspective, doing some Dutch oven cooking, and then we started doing it we would always do it in November, and then I would stay Friday night, and we would schedule it on the same that we'd been to a Texas A&M Fighting Aggie football game.
Okay.
And you talk about people that get into tailgating. Aggies get into tailgating. And, I mean, you really up their game. When you got a Chuckwagon and 200 people standing around eating, you've really upped the tailgating. And like I tell people, Chuckwagons, that's the original food truck.
That's great. That is
that's the original food.
You're so funny. That's great.
So we would tailgate, and then I started getting involved with their brisket camp and their summer barbecue camp. So brisket camp, we always take the wagon down. We just did that 2 weekends ago now, and that's how I started getting associated with all of these barbecue guys. So one of the things that we found in brisket camp was that we tried all different kinds of. I mean, they tried with different smokes, wrapped, unwrapped, different kinds of wood, different grades of briskets. But by Saturday afternoon, we had people who had eaten way too much protein, and
it looks like
really had their stomachs messed up. Right? I mean, you can, just like anything, it's balance in life. So Dr. Sable said, "Hey, Homer, why don't you?" Well, it started out just doing breakfast. On Saturday morning, we would do a big Cowboy breakfast, 150 people. And so bacon, eggs, hot biscuits, Texas A&M sausage, which is fantastic. Ray Riley runs the meat center there at Texas A&M, furnishes our sausage. and such good breakfast sausage. Breakfast tacos. We take leftover brisket from the day before and make breakfast taco with briskets,
That's so good.
and just a fantastic, just a great, big cowboy breakfast. Campfire coffee right on the fire, and man, and then it turned in. Hey, you know what we need to do? Not only do we need breakfast, let's cook some sides. And I know Daniel Vaughn always talks about this when he rates these barbecue places that you really, a good barbecue place really has to have good sides.
Oh
I don't
yeah,
care how good your brisket is. If you don't have some good sides to go with it, um, it really it's not
it
as
changes
good as
everything.
anybody else. I started doing sides for lunch. I'd always done, and the whole time we've been doing breakfast, we do some desserts. I really like to cook desserts, and so we do some cobblers and apple crisp, and I have a really good blueberry bread pudding, and so the desserts are always big hits at the camps. But the sides on Saturday have gotten to be a big deal for them. So we'll do
I didn't.
6, 7, 8 different sides. We'll do green chili hominy casserole. Have you ever eaten any hominy?
That's it's funny because I became friends because of barbecue with Kelly Yandel, and I had asked her about hominy, and one time she said, if you ever talk to Homer, ask him about hominy, because I've had maybe once in my life, because there's Mexican restaurants here in Los Angeles, but I've never had true hominy.
Right. So the Hispanic culture and Native American culture both use hominy a lot because in some forms you can get it in the dried form, and all hominy is really is a corn kernel that it's been soaked in lye
Okay.
water, and that lye water will make it swell up, and but you can get it canned now. A lot of great canned products, or you can get it dry. Dry is a little harder because you have to reconstitute it.
Okay.
Uh, but Native Americans use a lot of hominy in the Southwest,
Mhm.
and then in the South, it's also very popular because they will stone grind that dried hominy and make grits out of it. Hominy
Oh,
grits, if
okay.
you've ever heard that.
Yeah. Hmm.
So it's still that same product. So I use it, and I used canned hominy, and then we'll incorporate some green chilies into it, and some cream, and some onion and bacon, and then covered in cheese. So good. So
Oh,
that was a big hit. I think we used 6 number 10 cans, which was the big
yeah.
cans, the
Uh-huh.
1 gallon cans. Brisket camp this last, and they ate almost every bite of it. So just try to have some vegetables. We eat a lot of beans, so we'll do a pot of pinto beans. Joe Risky has one of the best lima bean, butter bean recipes that
Ah,
I've ever eaten, and I love
my
that
dad, when he
from
was
him.
alive,
And
loved butter beans so much, so much.
and some green beans. Let's see what else we do for that. Oh, we do some okra, and the other one that's a big hit and it's surprising is a cabbage. Just some fried cabbage with some onion and bacon,
Oh, love
and
that.
just
Love
do it in a big Dutch oven. And so that kind of gets something a little bit green into their system,
it.
and is now has become an important part of a brisket camp. The sides get to move more to center stage on the second day than they did on the first day.
Because I've always noticed that when I've seen photos of people in the morning, and I've seen your breakfast that you do. I didn't know that you did the sides, and so for people that are on the list or trying to be on the list for Foodways and for Texas A&M for these camps, do you do both camps or do you just do the one?
Just do the brisket. I mean, we just do breakfast and the sides for brisket camp.
Mhm.
I always attend the summer camp, but just sat on the panels.
Gotcha. Okay, I think I remember
I
seeing.
don't
Okay, okay.
participate. It's if you've ever been to College Station in July, it's hot, or in June, it's hot and humid and not conducive to chuckwagon cooking. I've turned into a fair weather chuckwagon cook. I'm either in the spring or the fall. But I
Okay.
put the wagon up about the 1st of June, and I don't get it out till the fall.
But that's something for people to look forward to. Not only do they get to meet all these great barbecue people and get all this knowledge, but if they attend the right camp. So if they get a chance to be on, go to Camp Brisket,
Don't
this is
turn it
something.
down just because you're going to miss breakfast. Go to either camp you can
Oh yeah,
go
no,
to.
yeah. I think
They're both.
if they call your number, you have to go. There's no, I would say yes to.
You have to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to go. One of the things that I think I've learned that I enjoy about both of those camps is just the people I meet. I mean, it's expanded my realm of friendships.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I get to hang out with Tootsie and Brian Breswell from Southside Market
Such a good guy.
and Russell and Missy and John Brotherton and all these barbecue people, that brings another, artist from up at Eva Mays in Lubbock. So many great barbecue people that I learn from, that I get, we swap recipes, we talk about cooking because I like to barbecue too.
Mm-hmm.
And I've really been fortunate to be able to hang out with those guys. This last brisket camp, and and sometimes I have to, because I don't recognize them out of their element, is that we're cooking, we're doing some desserts, and I see a guy over there. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of my buddy Arturo Garcia from Lubbock, another great barbecue guy.
Interesting looking guy too. Really interesting looking guy.
He could play in the movies.
He
right?
could, yes.
He could be in 1883, or he's just an interesting guy.
Yeah.
I said, like, who's the hell is that using our knives and cutting boards? And he goes, that's Tuffy Stone. I'm like, Tuffy Stone, the TV guy? What's he doing in here? And so Tuffy Stone's like, he hangs out with us all weekend, and he's fascinated by the whole process because he appreciates you got to appreciate the task and appreciate what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different form of cooking. Tuffy Stone he's a French trained culinary guy.
Yeah.
And then went over into the barbecue world, and he's under there chopping up cilantro and, hey, Homer, how'd you build these tables, and where'd that Dutch oven come from, and how do you know how much coals to put on there? And so he's in a different environment. I didn't recognize him, but then it's like, oh yeah, Tuffy Stone TV guy from out on the East Coast, barbecue guy, Pitmaster show.
And a great human. I finally got a chance to interview him about a year ago, and he was so kind, like kinder than I even imagined. And he just lost his father 2 years ago too. So he's going through. His father was involved with a lot of his cooks. So I think the way his mindset has changed a little bit too about how he looks at the barbecue world and how he looks at experience with people. So that's really nice.
Just cooking in general, but it's cooking, but it's relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing brings people together any closer than our relationship with. I mean, that's as primal, and that's another thing about the Chuckwagon is that's as primal as you can get. I mean, It's not very far removed from some guy sitting in a cave with a stick and sitting around a fire, and have our techniques gotten better? Obviously they have, or we're smarter. We were supposed to have evolved, but that's a very primal way of looking at life and reflecting on life, and
slowing down a little bit.
You can't sit by the fire and warm your feet up. Yeah, it does. But Tuffy Stone, great guy. Enjoyed having him at the Wagon, and
that's neat.
That was super cool. But just the relationships that we've made with people around the state is probably one of the most important part of this whole thing.
How do the kids take to what you're doing? Are they interested in learning when you come around and cook? Is that something that they're curious about? I hate to say kids, or young adults.
No, yeah, well, young adults, but my Ty, he was raised doing that. And, sometimes you don't always appreciate what you have around you. And I think as he's gotten older, he does. But I always work really hard, especially when I go down to A&M, because they have a number of people, graduate assistants and student workers. They hang out at that Wagon a bunch because they want to learn. They're fascinated by that. And I'll let them cook, and I'll let them cut stuff. But that's an opportunity as my friend Arthur says, a boy doesn't know what a man doesn't teach him. And, you have to take time to share that with those kids. I mean, you're teaching them life skills. You're teaching them to
Oh
cook.
yeah.
If they can cook at the wagon, they can cook at home.
Oh yeah.
And I tell you, one who's really gotten into that is Dr. Sable's grandson, Jackson. And Jackson works. Jackson just turned 16. Works for Hutchins
That's
up
okay.
in
He's the one. Okay.
McKinney, Frisco. And I, I, he called Jackson called me maybe 5, 6 years ago, and he was in Boy Scouts, wanted my bread pudding recipe, and he was taking that to scouting because the scouts still teach Dutch oven stuff, right?
Oh. Oh yeah.
And so he wanted to use that. He had seen me doing that at tailgate, and so he took that bread pudding recipe, and he went to his Boy Scout camp. Huge hit, but he has it now. Jackson has a fire pit in his backyard and a way to burn coals down, and he'll take his Dutch ovens and cook in the backyard. I turned him loose at Brisket camp. That boy, I built him a good fire that morning. He shows up at the crack of dawn, way before daylight, and cooks 300 biscuits for breakfast.
Love that.
And never burned a one.
Wow.
Stayed on top of them, and it's just cooking 300 biscuits in Dutch ovens is a challenge. And I felt good that I had taught him something, a skill that he can use. Great job, and he's cooking he just ran the Dutch oven for me, let me concentrate on, just the coordination part of turning out briskets for 100 people, 150 people over, over live fire.
How are you cooking like when you said eggs and bacon and things like that? Are you cooking? Do you have big cast iron grills, or how was that?
I've got 20-inch skillets.
Skillets.
I've got two 20-inch skillets that'll hold probably 75 eggs at a time.
Wow.
Big 20-inch skillets. Those things are, that big.
That's interesting. I guess it made sense. I was thinking you're not using anything with like little propane things like this. It's all natural. So I was trying to, in my mind, figure out how is he doing all this.
We do still use a lot of wood, but we do need to cheat a little bit when we're doing 150 people.
Yeah, right?
It's not it's not competition. So I will use some propane burners to like fry the sausage and to cook the eggs. And if you don't cheat, you don't try.
I've got a question about, because a lot of people that listen to this, I'm sure are curious about cowboy culture. Was that something that was ingrained in you? Was your family part of cowboy culture? Because you said you grew up on a ranch. So what is it about cowboy culture that you connect with?
In this part of Texas, even though we're one of the biggest metropolitan areas, fourth largest metropolitan area in the United States now, is that cowboy culture is still a big part of the Western culture is still part of our life. My dad worked on a ranch, and so I was around cowboys all the time in the Western way of life. And it really is just talking about values, and trying to be a good person and being loyal to somebody. There's a term that people use, and it says, do you ride for the brand? And that means, are you loyal to the people you work for? And, for the brand that you work for.
Yeah.
And so, riding for the brand is important, but just having good values, it's something that this country desperately needs right now, is that
more than
people
ever
to think like that. And more than ever. And I don't know in California if your podcast is being monitored by the government or not. I sure hope not.
I hope not.
And I'm just teasing when I say that.
I know, it's funny.
But just having good values, but cowboy culture, Western wild culture is still a big thing in certainly in this state. But there are people that need to listen to that, and just how important that is. But Fort Worth, I mean, you look at in Fort Worth, every day, 7 days a week, in our historic district in this Fort Worth Stockyards, they have a cattle drive there. They drive longhorns up and down the street twice a day there.
I didn't
And
know it was
you
every
would be
day. I thought it was
surprised
kind of
at every day at 11:30 and 4:30, or
okay.
11:30 and 4. You need to look at it. It's called the Fort Worth herd.
Okay.
And the herd is really the symbol of our city. It's a longhorn steer. And if you look at our fire trucks, at our badges, at our uh, business cards, they all have the longhorn on there. And it's part of that. It's part of that cowboy culture.
Well, it's
The
interesting
Fort
too.
Worth Stock Show and Rodeo just kicked off this weekend, and over the next 23 days, we'll have like 1.2, 1.3 million people attend that.
Wow, I've always wanted to.
It's really kicked off. It's a big deal.
How is
Really
it 23 days?
But,
So is there something every day then? It's some kind of event?
oh, absolutely. There is some livestock show. There's probably 20 or so performances of the rodeo, and they just moved into a beautiful new facility called Dickey's Arena. My wife and I attended the rodeo not before last, but now there's multiple events going on every day, and it's just crazy how busy it is. Horse shows, cattle shows, hogs, swine, sheep, llamas, cattle dog trials, mule jumping. I can't list all the things.
No,
Budweiser Clydesdales are there. I looked at those yesterday, which isn't. If you ever get a chance to see the Budweiser Clydesdale, go do it up close. Fascinating.
I've always wanted to. They're beautiful beasts, beautiful creature.
And that's such an operation.
There is over here in Los Angeles, and I wanted to go. There's a Gene Autry museum, and I've wanted to go for years to go to the Gene Autry museum. And then I think there's another place that's close by. My father loved John Wayne. He loved Gene Autry, and so I grew up, but I didn't have cowboy culture, but it was sort of the outdoor cooking. That was a way that I connected with my father, barbecuing. It wasn't offset cooking the way. Yeah.
So they have in the stockyards in Fort Worth last year opened the John Wayne Museum, which is really supported by his family. And it is a very, very interactive. A lot of his memorabilia and photographs are all in there. That's almost a destination in itself, is to go see the John Wayne Museum in the Fort Worth Stockyards. The herd goes right by the John Wayne Museum.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, on what day was it? Saturday, I attended the 90th birthday of a guy named Dean Smith. And Dean lives out here west of us a little bit. For his 90th birthday, he had a birthday, his wife and sons put on a birthday party for him. Anyway, Dean Smith, one of the most fascinating guys I've ever met, played in 10 John Wayne movies.
Really?
As a stuntman. Look him up. Look an image of Dean Smith.
Okay.
And then you're watching a John Wayne movie. You'll see him. He's in a bar fight. He's falling off a building. He's doing a horse stunt. But Dean Smith's a fascinating guy. Won the gold medal in 1952 in Helsinki. Was in the 50s, was the fastest man in the world. And then in about 1955, decided, he goes, you know what, I'm from Breckenridge, Texas. I know how to ride horses, rope. I go to Hollywood and be a stuntman. He was playing in the NFL. Quit the NFL, went to Hollywood, and probably has 150 movie credits, and played in 10 John Wayne movies. Just a fascinating guy, but still alive and looks great. But look him up. And look young images of him up. He was just a very handsome man, and still is a handsome man. But you'll see him in all kinds of movies and shows and old, Western series and that kind of stuff. Gunsmoke and Tales of Wells Fargo. And
I used to watch all that. That was my dad loved all that. And now if people want to hire you for an event, or how do they get what's the best way to get a hold of you? And do you have a website or what's?
So probably the easiest way is through my Instagram account, which is at Homer's Chuckwagon.
Okay.
And I love to have people follow me on that. And I try to post some pictures. Sometimes it's not always food. It's something to do with the wagon or something to do with life. Mm-hmm. But I really love Instagram. But at Homer's Chuckwagon.
You
Always
do
trying to
weddings,
get
right?
quite a bit of catering. I'd like to cater, but just because again, you get to meet a lot of really cool
Yeah,
people, and you get to pass the history part of that on, because how many people has gotten eaten off a Chuckwagon? Not many.
not
But
many.
they're fascinated by how we do that. And one of the projects that I've got going on right now, Kevin, is, and I'm kind of building a ranch cookhouse, and it's going to be, yeah, and it's going to be here behind my house, and I'm going to have just a big open room and a commercial kitchen down in one end. But it's kind of on a lot of these old ranches, they didn't have the chuck wagon out all the time. Still had crews, had cowboys sleeping in the bunkhouse. And so I'm going to have a little bunkhouse in there, and I'm going to have a commercial kitchen so that I don't have to roll the wagon out. Because one of the things I found is when I cater, it really beats my wife's kitchen up. And so we've come to an agreement that I can build a ranch cookhouse so that I can get out of her kitchen and get all my junk out of here. Because
Is
you do
it?
collect a lot of cooking paraffin. That's a project I'm going to do probably in my retirement, where I can cook and enjoy that. It's going to have a place for my smokers and all that, so I can really get into it a little bit more.
You're gonna have folks out there too? Is that going to be something where you'll have?
I might, I may have a few people out here. I don't want it to. I can't. I'm not going to turn it into a restaurant.
It's not an event space.
I don't know if you've ever interviewed him, but I think he's a great barbecue guy. But he has one of the best, I think, one of the best restaurants in the state, and that's Tom Perini. Do you know
He's on my list.
Tom?
I every month I have a list, and I always think I need to talk to Tom Perini because I've seen his ranch and I've seen photos of the interior with
No,
that big fireplace.
if that's my death row meal. So if I'm ever on death row, and they said, what do you want? I'm asking for Perini stuff.
Okay, what would you order?
What would I order from Perini's? I'd have the ribeye, the Perini zucchini, which is a zucchini dish that he cooks, and it's so good. Probably that, a green salad, and the bread pudding,
Bread pudding. Okay. Do you
or
have
the
all your
strawberry shortcake.
strawberry shortcake too? You might as well. I spoke over it. I apologize. Wait, so you also would have the strawberry shortcake?
I love his strawberry shortcake. It's really good. It's
Thank
one of those destination places is that you go to, and it's so rustic and so simple, but it's so beautiful. Tom is a James Beard winner. Super guy, president of the Texas, at one time president of the Texas Restaurant Association,
Wow.
and his location is, it's I don't know, probably 15 miles south of Abilene, and in a beautiful little town called Buffalo Gap. You wouldn't think that quality of restaurant would be out in the middle of nowhere, but it is.
Is there somewhere to stay there, or is it just a restaurant?
He has two small cabins that are pretty cool, that you can stay there on the
Oh,
property. But it's 10, 12, 15 miles to Abilene, and
yeah,
there's
yeah.
plenty of
You could
hotel
stay there.
rooms there. But it's one of those must go to spots, destination spot.
Thank you for bringing that up. I wanted to ask you about a painting that I saw. What was that? A painting of you? Who did that painting?
So that painting was done by a young man named Tyler Crow, and Tyler's, I don't know, he's probably 30 now, and is probably one of America's, if he's not already, one of America's greatest cowboy artists. So he focuses on that Western genre, horses and cattle and cowboys. And that's something that he and I talked about for maybe 2, 3 years. I've cooked. Tyler's been at the Wagon a lot, and he had this vision of what he wanted to paint, and it took us about 2 years of trying different things for it to finally come out. And he had that at their annual show in Fort Worth back in November, first weekend in November. He painted that picture of me. I was very honored by that.
Yeah,
Obviously, beautiful. I think that thing sold for 12 or $13,000.
really. That's so beautiful. It's
Um,
gorgeous.
yes, yeah, really meant a lot to me to have that done. I was really honored by that. But just a great photograph, and he took a photograph and then but painted it in oil, and
Yeah.
he's such a talented young man, but does all kinds of stuff. But he just and just a good human being. He and that entire family, his whole family, very talented. His dad's bit and spur maker for
Oh,
horse bits and cowboy spurs. His brother is very accomplished, and you need to look him up on Instagram. His brother's name is Tanner Crow, and he's a silversmith.
oh,
So he's intricate engraving, and then Tyler's the painter of the family.
oh, oh. This is, I could talk to you for 5 hours, 10 hours. I am honored that I have a chance to sit down with you because I feel like I've learned so much. And like another reason how you talk about how you like to meet people doing what you do. The reason why I do this, there's a little bit of a selfishness that I get a chance to meet you personally and chat with you and get to know you before I see you at camp or I see you when I come to Fort Worth. But I'm honored. Thank you so much for taking the time.
You're certainly welcome. And I'm sorry we didn't get to talk more about cooking and talk about, we talked a little bit about cooking, but man, there were just a lot of topics to cover,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Is there
like you
anything that
said,
we missed
go on.
specifically that
I
you
could
would want to talk
go on for hours.
about? So can I.
I want people to get out and especially during these difficult days of with COVID, and I know a lot of people are locked up. Is get out and enjoy your restaurants and enjoy events. Like I'll be this spring. I have a number of catering events to do, but I'll also be cooking at the Fort Worth Wine and Food Festival.
Oh,
That's a place they have an event on a Sunday afternoon called Ring of Fire, and so
oh,
barbecue people. I'll have my Chuckwagon there. There'll be a number of different things associated with the Fort Worth Wine and Food Festival. But on Sunday afternoon, we focus on barbecue and meat and distilled spirits and cold beer and that kind of stuff. But I just want to encourage people to get out
mhm.
and enjoy what's going on in this great country, and especially what's going on in this great food world right now. I mean, how exciting is
It's
what we're seeing in the culinary world right now? So many great chefs and television shows and just the quality of food and what's going on, and that's
and
what I want to encourage people to do
I
is get
agree.
out and enjoy that. Hey, and cook at home too.
Mhm. It's important. A lot of my relationships
We
with women have been started with cooking. It's because it's sharing that the cooking. It's such a wonderful. It's creating a delicious meal with somebody else. There's that connection. There's something that you can't take away.
Yeah, well, I mean, what says love more than that?
Mhm.
When you're cooking for somebody and sharing it with them, I don't know a better way to give your love to somebody else,
Mhm.
or appreciation for whether it's a friendship or it's a romantic involvement, or just trying to meet somebody new. You
Mhm.
know, we don't we don't do enough dinner parties
No.
where we invite people that maybe don't necessarily, and that brings up a good point, is that we may not, especially with the country so divided, when we're talking about, saw a deal the other day where 37 or 47% of college age uh, Democratic women wouldn't date somebody that was a Republican.
Wow.
We need to quit forgetting, we need to
Yeah.
forget about that and just start focusing on the people. We all have some common ground.
Hmm.
And how can we share that? Food is certainly one of them.
Hmm.
Sitting down and having a meal. It's hard to be mad at people that you're breaking bread with.
That's very true, and it's a great opportunity to understand their point of view and to share your point of view because that's what makes us great as humans and wonderful as people is our differences. That's
Sure.
our strength. Our strength is our differences, and people use those differences to polarize.
Right. Right. And that it shouldn't be that way. But
Yeah, but it's
thank
a
you for what you're doing and spreading the gospel of barbecue and cooking and
thank you.
you're just in the wrong part of the world. This from here to South Texas is the epicenter of all things barbecue.
Believe
Um,
me, I'm
well, you got to appreciate what you're doing for your mom too. I've been through that very same process. I stayed with my mother after my dad passed away and she had a stroke. I stayed with my mother just about every weekend that I wasn't out cooking or working for 14 years.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're
And
kindred spirits.
Ty and I stayed there almost every weekend to so that she could, have that sense of home.
Hmm.
But that says a lot about you, Kevin, taking care of her like that. I'll send you some Chuckwagon pictures and some
Please,
pictures from Camp Brisket.
please
Now
do
that
it.
Kelly didn't come this time, but our ability to document Camp Brisket was not as good without Kelly there because she focused on that shots.
So there's a photo of you with a bandana, and that I think I would like to. I'm gonna ask her
A
if I could.
wild,
Oh, go on.
in Texas we call that a wild rag.
A
I
wilder,
started to wear one this morning. It's called a wild rag,
wild rag.
and
Okay.
because right, not a bandana, it's a wild rag made out of silk. Okay,
Okay.
they're silk scarves, and they said that why you call that a wild rag? Because if you ever see a guy wearing it, he's more than likely wild.
Well, I almost wore one like a bandana today just to because I thought maybe you would, and I thought, well, no, I could kind of match. But
I almost had one on. It's pretty chilly here this morning. It's down below freezing here in Texas this morning. Thanks, Kevin.
thank you so much, Homer. All right, take care.